Hello, scholars. I am so excited to be back with you for another week and another virtual lesson. This week's lesson comes from lesson 21 from your packet. You know the drill. Pause this video, go and grab your packet if you have it. If not, grab a piece of paper and pencil so we can roll right along with our lesson. All right, so hopefully you've got that with you. Let's go ahead and jump right in to what we're going to be learning about today. Today, we are going to be learning about relating decimals and fractions. And at first, we're going to review that prerequisite skill, which is what we need to know in order to be the best we can be on the lesson today. And the best part about it, I'll let you in on another little secret, is you already learned how to do this, which is awesome. So you're going to be able to have the best success in this lesson. So our prerequisite skill today is that we are going to be able to find equivalent fractions. You'll see a great example on that front page of your packet, if not you're seeing it here, and it uses both the multiplication and models, and we love using models because they help us visualize the math that we're seeing. So you'll see that they're comparing 6/10ths and 60/100ths, and we'll see how they are equivalent to each other. Now, they also use multiplication, and anytime we're going from tenths to hundredths with multiplication and equivalent fractions, we are going to multiply by 10/10ths or 10/10. Now keep that in mind as we are about to go down and do an example problem together. So let's go ahead and look at number 1 in your packet, and just in case you are a little bit lost, it's on page 219. Page 219 should be the front page. So we're going to write the fractions that the models show below. So my first question for you is, what fraction does this model represent? Hopefully you said tenths. And then I'm going to ask you here, what fraction model does this represent? Hopefully you said hundredths. So I know that when I'm going to write out these fractions, once I discover what they are, this one is going to have a denominator of 10, and this one is going to have a denominator of 100. So let's go ahead and count. Here we go for the first one. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10. So I know that this first model represents 4/10. Now, when I look over at this model, it looks very similar, except that this is partitioned into hundredths. So each of these rods is worth 10. So when I count, I'm going to count by 10. So here we go. 10, 20, 30, 40, hundredths. So I see here that 4/10ths is equivalent to 40 hundredths. So we're going to use these two fraction models and use multiplication to find these equivalent fractions. Now, if you recall at the beginning of this video, just a few seconds ago, I said that if we're using fraction multiplication to find equivalent fractions, we are going to be multiplying by 10/10 when we're going from tenths to hundredths. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do 4/10 times 10/10. Now I want you to go ahead and do that multiplication in your head right now. Let's go ahead and do that. 4 times 10 is 40. Hopefully you're saying that with me. And then 10 times 10 is 100. So I see that these are a little crooked, but 4/10 times 10/10 equals 40 hundredths. So I know that 4/10 is equivalent to 40 hundredths. So hopefully that felt like a really good quick review on how to use models and how to use multiplication to find equivalent fractions. Now what I'd like us to do is I would like us to look at a word problem on page 220 that is going to have us do something similar. Let's go ahead and read this together on page 220, right above numbers 4 and 5. Of the 100 students in the 4th grade, 70 students are girls. Now, I'm going to think, what do I know and what do I not know? I know that there are 100 students in the 4th grade. And I also know that there are 70 of those students are girls. So right away, if I were to write that as a fraction to represent how many girls there are, I know that it would be 70 over 100, and that's how many, and I'm just going to put girls, G for girls. So let's look at what number 4 is asking us to do. It says, write a fraction in tenths and write a fraction in hundredths to tell what fraction of the 4th grade students are girls. Well, guess what? We just wrote it as hundredths, so we're a step ahead. So I know that I'm just going to draw an arrow here just for time's sake, but I know that 70 hundredths is equal to the amount of girls. Now I'm going to think in my head, what is the equivalent fraction in tenths to 70 hundredths? 7 tenths is equivalent to 70 hundredths. So I'm also going to write 7 tenths. So go ahead and do that. Now, I'm going to leave you hanging a little bit on problem 5, but I'm going to get you started. So let's read it together. It says, write a fraction in tenths and a fraction in hundredths to tell what fraction of the 4th grade students are boys. So if I know that 70 out of 100 of the students are girls, I need to figure out how many of those students are boys. So how am I going to get to 100 out of 100? I want to think. I'm going to have to create an equation, and I'm going to leave you there because I want you to try to discover it on your own. Be sure to share your answers with me or your teacher so we can know how you ended up solving this. But let's go ahead and move on down to page 221. And this is where we are going to be naming the same amount. And you'll see here that they did decimals and models this time. So I see 7 tenths represented as a fraction here and 70 hundredths represented as a fraction here. And it shows us in a place value chart that 7 tenths as a fraction can be written as 0.7, and 70 hundredths can be written as a decimal as 0.70. So let's go ahead and try one on our own. I know we're going to be great at this. So it says, what decimal is equivalent to 3 tenths? Fill in the place value chart to show the decimal. Well, 3 tenths is a fraction, and it's not a fraction greater than 1, so I know that there are going to be 0 ones. Now, how many tenths does it say we have? Hopefully you said that it has 3 tenths. 3 tenths. Now, look at this one. It's going to get a little more complex here. It says, what decimal is equivalent to 55 hundredths? Fill in the place value chart to show the decimal. Now, is 55 hundredths a fraction greater than 1? No. So I'm going to go ahead and put 0. Now what I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause the video and fill in the place value chart for how you think you would write in 55 hundredths on this place value chart. Hopefully you paused the video and you filled it in, and what you should have is that you should have that 55 hundredths is equivalent to 5 tenths and 5 hundredths. 5 tenths and 5 hundredths is the same as 55 hundredths. So that's how I would write it in a place value chart. Now, I'm going to use that information of how I just wrote 55 hundredths as a decimal to rewrite the decimal equivalent for 75 hundredths. So go ahead and once again, press pause. Write what you think is a decimal equivalent to 75 hundredths. All right, now go ahead and check your answer with mine. Hopefully, got to draw my little decimal point there. Hopefully you put 0.75, which shows 75 hundredths. Now, you'll notice on page 222, it's going to have you be working with models. So you're going to shade in to show 80 hundredths, and then you're going to write the decimal equivalent. And it's going to be, then it's going to ask you to do it in tenths. And then you're going to answer some questions about it, which will be great. Then you're going to get down to this page, which is page 223, where you're going to study the example problem to show how to write a decimal as an equivalent fraction. So they're going to have you do it in a few different forms. The 3 forms they're going to have you do it in is decimal form, word form, and fraction form. And so I want to remind you, when we're working with word form, for example, we see here it says show 34 hundredths in a place value chart. When I say that out loud, it helps me to be able to know what I'm going to write, in word form. So when I take this text box here, and if I want to write 34 hundredths in words, I know that I'm going to say, okay, 34 hundredths. How would I write that? Okay, 34 hundredths. So I want to be careful that I'm saying the decimal correctly, so then when I go to write it in word form, I go ahead and write it correctly. Number 5 is going to be a good way to challenge and to test to see if the number sentences are true or false. And then I'd really like to challenge you with number 8. Number 8 is a number line that shows how one whole is divided into tenths, and it wants you to fill in the numbers. So some are going to be in fractions and some are going to be in decimals. And then it's going to have you explain your thinking on how to, what numbers to write. I am so excited to see how you guys do for this week's lesson. I can't wait to hear back from you all. I miss you, and I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time.